So thanks for joining us today. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Lisa Schneegans, and I'm the co-founder of Buzz360, and we are an RNC approved vendor. I'm really excited about today's presentation because we met Noah on the Never Back Down for DeSantis for President team in Iowa, and it was such a great experience working with him and the rest of the team. Noah has worked for campaigns at all levels in 24 states across the country, from school board all the way up to President of the United States. He comes from the battleground state of Nevada, where he has a strong record of frontline, hard-fought races that brings a wealth of experience and understanding to campaigns. Noah has expanded his experience to a national level in 2016 in the presidential cycle, where he worked on the Nevada caucus team that delivered 7 delegates for Senator Marco Rubio. Following the presidential election, he worked at the as a legislative correspondent for the Elko Daily Free Press, covering Nevada state legislature. Over the next few cycles, Noah held leadership roles with Adam, and I might butcher his last name, Lizact, in 2018, campaigned for governor. Martha McSally in 2020, campaigned for U.S. Senate, and Vanguard Field Strategies, where he ran direct voter contact outreach and operations, in 5 states. Noah has a strong understanding, the grit, and I can attest to that in Iowa, has the grit that it takes to really perform and deliver against when you're the underdog. In 2020, he pulled off a historic upset where he flipped a coveted seat in the Clark County School Board, despite a 10-to-1 spending by the opposition. In early 2021, he served as the principal advisor for the convention and election operations for Glenn Youngkin's successful campaign for governor in Virginia. In 2023 is when Noah took on the challenge of leading the presidential super PAC Never Back Down in Iowa effort, which built the largest grassroots operation in caucus history and enabled Governor DeSantis to outperform his polls on average of approximately 5 points and propelled him to a 2nd place finish. Noah had joined Axiom Strategies in 2021, where he worked on several challenging races across the country over the last 3 cycles in 20 different states. You must be on the road a lot, Noah. And 20 different states. So today he continues to work on various races and projects, pushing candidates and their teams and integrating data, branding, messaging, in all aspects of their operation. So just in a minute, I'm going to turn this over to Noah, and he's going to do a presentation. Noah, I'm going to make you the presenter here in just a second.
Perfect.
And okay, so you should have it now, Noah. And after Noah is done, then we're going to come back. We're going to have some questions. You can put your questions in the chat between now and then. We're going to have it open it up for Q&A. And then, of course, I'm going to come back on after Noah's done and talk a little bit about Swipe Red and, what's near and dear to my heart. And I've even got some numbers that we're going to share with what Noah and his team did with Swipe Red for the DeSantis Never Back Down team. So Noah, take it away.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for the warm introduction, Lisa. Yes, I'm Noah Jennings. I serve as State Director at Axiom Strategies. And to put a shorter point on the bio, I've worked in numerous states on behalf of conservative candidates.
Sorry, I got a webinar starting. I got to try to...
Hang on, can everybody put themselves... Wait a minute, let me see here. Put everybody on mute.
Let me get my volume turned down here.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
Mute, please.
Well, get this. I just got this thing.
Let's
We
see,
have
I
a
can't
half-day
get my-
kayak scheduled.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Gail, that's you.
Get this here. Your activity is less than 48 hours away.
Okay, I'm
Please
going to put
list
them on mute.
questions. Be sure to bring your personal...
Okay.
There we go. No worry. All right. So yes, I've worked on behalf of conservative candidates and causes from Nevada to Arizona and Virginia, and then all the way to Iowa with a few pit stops along the way. So while my resume and conservative credential probably prohibit me from giving a TED Talk on those stages, I'm excited to welcome you to my first Buzz Talk. Lisa and Klaus, you can use that in the future. And what I'm here to discuss is winning field, ground game, and election operations, or, as we're going to call it today, the mechanics of a movement. So the first question I'm going to pose sounds kind of simple, and why should you invest the time, energy, and capital that it takes to build a ground game? From a staff level, you do it for a variety of reasons, the simple of which might be that every staffer has had a turbulent night of no sleep right before you're responsible for an event, running through any number of different scenarios, at the core of which is the terrible, horrible nightmare that the principal or candidate shows up to an empty room and their line of sight pans straight to you. But it's not all about just filling rooms. And the reality of why you should build a ground game is actually a lot deeper, more meaningful, and something we probably don't fully appreciate in this field until we look at it a little bit deeper. So whether your candidate is running for national office and making their first stop through Iowa, or running for school board in the district where they've lived and worked for years, when you recruit somebody into your ground game, you're asking them not just to give you their time and talent and energy, but you're asking them to give you their credibility. And so we spend a lot of time and strive to build movements because we as people want to belong to something. And that speaks a long time back to when the first people came together in tribes, and towards even after world wars, when they came together in legions and VFWs, veterans organizations, and Elks lodges. But it creates a narrative and an energy around a candidate or cause that you just can't manufacture. And that's what we, as political operatives, I think all strive to do in every campaign that we work on. So the first question when you're looking at that movement, now that you know what you need, is who do you need to build it? And contrary to sometimes popular opinion, any student with a just out of school and a casual membership in the College Republicans isn't always what you need. So in his book, The Tipping Point, Malcolm Gladwell talks about a movement that requires three different sorts of people. And those are salespeople who make change happen through persuasion, and connectors who make change happen through people, and then mavens who make change happen through information, ideas, and spreading of those. Now, if you're wondering which one of those you are, if you start talking about your next project and somebody's instantly hooked, or you sell things without meaning to, that probably means you're a salesman. If you're constantly referring people to the right expert or service to solve their problem, or you love networking and talking with people just for the sake of doing it, work or not, probably makes you a connector. And if you love looking at an idea, exploring an idea, spending months in the depths of one particular idea or set of ideas, then you're probably that maven who makes change through information and ideas. Now, I'm not going to go too much further into Gladwell's book for our purposes, but what I will say is that he strikes on a serious point, and that's that every large-scale movement requires all three of those things. Now, unfortunately, the kind of massive fashion trends and political revolutions that he writes about in his book consist of hundreds and thousands of people of these different personalities, and with all of our fundraising might in politics, our budget doesn't really give us the scope to hire all of that. But intuition and building our teams can do that. So I'd pose it to you that to hire any one of these would present a problem of the absence of the other two. That isn't prohibitive of finding somewhat of a generalist person who bears the qualities of each without too profoundly expressing one over the other two. I would say that you can teach someone politics and issue stances and the functions of your local county party committee or your state GOP, but you can't change who they are. And so when you're recruiting for a movement, while the candidate or cause is the hook that gets someone in the door, they stay because of the community they build. And that means we have to seek out that generalist of all these three different things when you're looking at who you want to build and be a part of your individual movement. So once you've got the people that form the backbone of that movement, who are those generalist salesmen, connectors, and mavericks or mavens all in one, you connect the dots a little bit more. And this is where the relational organizing kicks in. And this is a lot of what Lisa and Klaus do on a daily basis. So I want to take back to my first day of my first real full-time campaign job, when our campaign manager, who our campaign manager, who was one of the most brilliant political operatives that I've worked with and ever known, gave me a 2-year-old list of precinct captains and a copy of Groundbreakers, which is the book written about the way the Obama campaign organized block by block. And I sat there in the office thinking, well, what on earth do I do now? I had a little bit of an introspective moment, learned more than a few things about relational organizing, especially on that first campaign, and have since had the opportunity to experiment with it in campaigns to come. So as everyone knows, when you're looking at starting a campaign, you go to your pool of usual suspects in any given state or district or community, at your GOP meetings or your legislative district meetings, or wherever you might go for your first stop. And once you've visited and made your way through every one of those county and district meetings and made your recruiting pitch to everybody in the room, the law of diminishing returns kicks in pretty quickly. So that's when you have to dig deeper and dig a little bit smarter to leverage the folks that you've already brought into your network as the first ring of what we call the relational organizing snowflake. So that's done in large part by leveraging the individual interests of the people who joined your organization. And in a strong operation, I like to think that there's a place for as many people as choose to join. You just have to find the sweet spot. So when I have my field staff going out to meet with a potential volunteer to recruit somebody into the movement, I make sure that they line up and they actually write down their 3 individual asks of what they're going to look for, what they're going to try and get somebody to do. Because somebody might not want to knock on doors or make calls, but they might want to share something on social media, or they might want to work on poll watching. And so having those asks lined up and finding that sweet spot is key. And whether it be that knocking on doors or making calls or sending texts, becoming a poll watcher, organizing election day operations at their local voting center or precinct, or even just coming in and staffing the office and making sure the snacks are all out and the call sheets are ready, and whatever else you might need, everybody has a place. And once you've identified that place, we're able to give that member of the team the charge to open their own Rolodex, lend their credibility to expand the movement. And everybody knows somebody. And so by giving somebody something that they're excited about, they can then go and share their own excitement, and they become that thing that we need to continue recruiting. And all of a sudden, your first ring of 4 volunteers becomes a ring of 8 volunteers, becomes a ring of as many as you can find. So with those fundamentals in place of the people and being able to find something, we're able to build and expand a movement into the places that we need it the most. That means weaving the messaging of the campaign and the candidate to the audiences who need it the most. That means that from the doors and phones, social media, and from television screen to the stump, we have to look at what makes a successful campaign. And so the most successful campaigns precisely target and boldly execute a coherent messaging strategy that hits its targets and drives the narrative of the race. And that narrative tells the audience of voters who the candidate is, why they're running, where they stand, whether that be in comparison to the opponent or defending against an attack. And finally, it wraps it all up at the end with why they should receive their vote. It's a narrative that you echo across all the mediums for any given universe of targets. And through coalitions and volunteers in their own communities, you can spread it by the most effective means possible. So my job here today is not to pitch Swipe Red, but this is where I'll put in the plug for the product, in that it allows you to carry that message to people by leveraging their own relationships. Volunteers carrying a message cold to doors and by phone definitely has its place in the economy of scale, but in the world of noise, and particularly in the presidential cycle that we're all in right now and that we're going to see as the year progresses, there's going to be a lot of oxygen being sucked up, a lot of the air being taken out of the room. Nothing cuts through more than a neighbor making the most important ask in American politics of their own neighbor, and that is asking for their vote. So when you're in a tight race, drawing down the stretch, you've already set the narrative of who your candidate is, why, and what. the final closing narrative is really set by your team and your volunteers, and is almost as important as every bit of the overall message, because there's a shocking number of people motivated to turn out by feeling like they're part of the winning team. And that's why we should be investing more time and energy into building quality environments for volunteers where people feel encouraged and proud to bring people into the office, where they want to gather at the office like it's their Elks Lodge or their Legion Bar or the community center. If a volunteer comes into an office with a uncomfortable seat and makes calls for an hour sitting on their own, the odds are pretty high that they're not going to come back. I've lived that mistake and learned from it pretty heavily. But if they come in and there's a sense of energy and vibrance, and people are moving around with a sense of purpose and a general buzz of activity, you feel the momentum, you see the momentum, that's something for them to be proud of. And we reward those volunteers. We trust them as members of our team to have information, to get an inside look at the operation, to be able to go home and go to the Thanksgiving dinner table and share that they were an integral part of building this movement. And one of the best examples of a well-run operation is one where everyone comes away feeling like they were in charge of a crucial part of that operation. That's kind of onus on a volunteer or an activist that makes the difference and creates real staying power. I think that's what we're all looking for in this business. Because oftentimes as operatives, we're called into a state to build a campaign or an organization for a set amount of time. And as a party, we frequently build these great operations with, questionable staying power, moving from cycle to cycle with very little continuity. Now, personally, I don't like repetitive cyclical tasks. And so I don't like reinventing the wheel every time I go somewhere. But I'll, kind of end with this thought that the people that we recruit into a campaign or an organization are going to be there in a state or district long after we leave. And so could we foster longevity of the conservative movement by investing thoughtfully as we build a ground game? I think we could. And I think that's where the value comes in, taking a movement, building that movement, but then giving it staying power, empowering your people to keep recruiting into that movement even after you're gone. And you see it, as evidence today. I got a picture from some of our volunteers in Iowa having breakfast all together at a diner in Des Moines. And so I think that's the staying power of a movement that you want to see long term. And I think that's the value of a winning ground game and winning election operation. So with that, thank you, Lisa and Klaus, for giving me the opportunity to speak today. I will absolutely happily stand for any questions, and look forward to continuing this conversation further.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Noah. So I'm going to just, anybody that has any questions, there was a question in the chat, and let me get that again. And maybe you can speak to this since we do have a few minutes. And the question was, or Joe, go ahead and jump in and ask.
Hey, Noah, it's Joe Junker. How are you?
Hey, Joe, good to see you. Good. How are you?
Good. Hey, I was just curious about that BI matrix you had of the turnout score, ballot score, and the numbers behind that as far as how you really, unless that's not a trade secret or also way too basic and I'm too ignorant, either way, whatever.
No.
I didn't really understand that.
Sure. Yeah, no, I'm happy to explain this. This is a lot of data firms use this. This is how you break down your analytics, and you weight and you divide all of your voters into a universe based off their turnout and their ballot. And so turnout, being almost certain is a 1, 0 probability in between. And then the ballot at a 1, somebody is definitely in your corner, and at a 0, they're not. And so when we build a universe, and I say we very royally because I do not do data, but the data folks, through the science of what they do, determine who your base voter is. That's definitely, if they turn out, they're definitely going to vote for you. Your lower propensity turnout voters who you need to make sure turn out. And then, when there's room towards your 1 score, the people that you could register, create new voters, expand your universe, and bring into the fold. And then in the in-between area, at a number that varies in, turnout and ballot score, is your persuadable voter who, theoretically, if they're at 0.5, they're up in the air between, and then everything to the right or left is just, you have to really lock those folks in.
Far out. I saw it now. It wasn't really sinking in, but now it makes sense. To the far upper right is somebody who's really going to show up and vote, usually if based on history. And the far lower left, 0-0, means no chance.
Yes. Yep. That's right.
Thanks.
Absolutely. Lisa, I think you might be muted.
Sure. What other questions do people have? No, I'd like to have you talk a little bit, just because of firsthand experience, how do you get people engaged like that across, I mean, my experience with you was in Iowa, and, you had what, 1,600 different, precinct officers or precinct chairs. How do you get people engaged like that? Because that can be a challenge. How do you do that?
Sure. So, I think the best practice when you're, out there and you're talking to folks is, first you have to find your likely pool of folks, and that could be done through a variety of ways, whether it's taking a list of people who attend your events, whether it's, running a quick text poll out to people saying, do you support candidate so-and-so, Y or N, and having them respond. You can even do a follow-up text on that saying, would you like to get involved as precinct captain, or whatever that might be. The key is finding as many different data inputs as possible to generate leads for yourself, because the reality is you're still in a somewhat sales type business where you have to go out there and make those cold calls to those people, and you just want to get the warmest leads possible. And so once you have that list and have that universe that you can go after, the key is then to convert those folks by making the call, lining up your 3 asks of them, finding a way to get them involved. And then once they're hooked and involved, escalating those asks further and further, as opposed to just asking them to take over the campaign on day one.
Yeah, that's you're right on that. Other questions? Let's see, do we have any in the chat? Linda, you have a question.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, how much in person did you do versus texting? Were you texting to get leads and then you'd invite them to a meeting or something?
Sure. So in any different campaign, it's always a little bit different. You have some candidates, like Governor DeSantis in Iowa, who went out and visited all 99 counties. And so we had a warm pool of folks who were ready to jump in, or who had just seen him. We could immediately chase those. And then, you get the candidates who might not want to do so many in-person appearances. And so that's where you have to, go out and text, or spend a little bit on digital, or find innovative ways to go out and get them.
And we have another question here on how do you get people to share text messages? And I mean, I know from firsthand experience that can be a challenge, and sometimes it goes really well, but I want to hear your answer, Noah.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that, the biggest value we found, and we had, a little bit of time to experiment with Swipe Red and getting people involved, and finding different ways to, make that ask. I think if you level with people up front and talk to them about the fact that, they are the front line of our operation, they're the part of our voter contact operation we're relying on, and you give them that charge that, this is what we need them to do in order for candidate so and so to win. It makes a big difference. And so, I think that was where we found a lot of success.
Okay.
Just giving them the ownership.
Okay, now we have some other questions. Joe, it seems like you might have another question. So if you want to just go ahead and.
Sorry, guys. You start talking, you brought the question up, Lisa, about organizing teams. And Noah, I was wondering if you guys have an experience about some of the best methodologies to be able to keep the team organized on messaging as well as activity, and whether you have an idea, what ratio did you guys try to establish between a team leader and the volunteers in order to kind of keep them aligned and not let them go off into left field and take their own initiatives and maybe message counter the candidate or something?
Sure. Yeah. So, at the core of everything with pulling in volunteers is, care and feeding and making sure from day one that someone feels like they're on the team. And so, that was something that I think we did exceptionally well in Iowa, where, within a week of somebody signing up, and actually it got down to being within about 48 hours of someone signing up to be a precinct captain or to serve in one of those roles, they would get a box with a hat, some stickers, a caucus card, a letter. My hands got really tired from signing a lot of letters, but we would make sure to very much include people as a part of the team from day one. And so, as time progressed, every 2 weeks we would do a call, and that would be with the surrogate, whether that be the governor himself, or Governor Reynolds, or Senate President, or Steve Deace, or Bob Vanderplatz, any of those folks. We would have them do a call with all these different folks. We'd dial out to them, text them to remind them the call's happening, and get them on the horn so they could get the inside lane on what's going on. What's the governor seeing? What's Bob seeing? Why is this different, or how is this? How's the movement progressing? And so, we found ways like that to arm people with tools and give them messaging points. Was actually very effective to keep them from spinning off on their own. And then in terms of keeping volunteers together and keeping them coordinated, there were some larger precincts where we had 6 or 7 folks, and they all had a little group chat on Signal. I think about my guys in Des Moines who would start a group chat with people in local precincts in that particular area and give them the ability to communicate and talk back and forth. I feel bad because their phones are probably blowing up nonstop. But finding ways to create groups of 7 or 8 people to be kind of a pod and to go out and expand the movement within their own neighborhood was very, very effective.
Thanks, Noah. Really appreciate it.
No, and I know we've got one person on this call today. One of the things that you did was, give out some merchandise, hats, books. One of the people on this call today won the book, the signed book. That was Dennis Smith. So he's on here today, and he has the signed book.
Dennis was the top scorer. I do remember.
Yeah, it was.
Thank you, Dennis.
Okay, so we have another question here. How is AI transforming field ground game and GeoTV? Can you recommend any AI software for voter ID, persuasion, or GeoTV?
Sure. This is, I'll admit, not my strongest field, and I've been resistant. But the reality is AI is getting big, and it's changing the way we think about things. And you can use it for a variety of purposes. There's some folks who have been working on trying to have AI actually have conversations with voters via text. I know WPAI, the polling firm that we use at Never Back Down, has some AI projects that they're really excited about. So I would refer any expertise questions to them, but I will say that there's a lot going on with regards to how can we find ways to do these kinds of things and have these kinds of conversations with voters at mass scale. And while I think those are, only going to get better, and that kind of technology is probably only going to improve, I think that there's still just such an inherent value in people using their individual relationships and leveraging their connections to people, that it can't be understated how useful that is, and how good time spent that is.
Thank you.
Lisa, I think you're muted again.
Sorry about that. Can you use this program in a primary as a test or learning curve to be better prepared for the general election?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I mean, I think that, the entire purpose of a primary, if you don't have a serious primary opponent, is to be able to run a little bit of a GeoTV test and build up your operation. Now, lacking a seriously competitive primary, sometimes it takes a while for folks to staff up. But the fundamentals that you develop and the team that you develop in a primary can absolutely make themselves better by running through that process once in the primary, and then having the general to take a moment, be introspective, look at the best practices they developed, and then start going, further. I would say that's a big part, and we learned a lot about what our operation was capable of on Governor Youngkin's convention day in Virginia, when we had 39 different convention sites and we had staff at all of them, and we really worked on that. And so when it came time to man 500 polling locations across the state, starting 45 days out with about 30, and scaling up from there, we knew a lot more because we had the system in the primary, and because we had put ourselves together to be ready for that general election.
Cool. Okay, so let's see, what other questions do we have here? We have somebody that's saying, can you provide any more information on how Barack Obama organized block by block? It's intriguing.
Yeah, absolutely. I would encourage definitely to read the book Groundbreakers. Without going too far into it, I was in Nevada, and one of his first battleground states during the Democratic primary, and got to see firsthand that the old rundown closed local subway that was down the street from my house was a thriving campaign office for the Obama campaign. And so they really did a revolutionary job at finding people who were aligned with their cause, pulling them in, getting them to go above and beyond. And a lot of them, probably a majority of them, were not paid people, but they recruited hundreds of thousands of volunteers into the effort and made each of them feel that their time was being well spent, and that they were backing a cause that was changing the country. And that was very remarkably done by their operation. Lisa, I think you're muted again.
Sorry.
Don't worry.
I did put a link in there for the Amazon location for that book. Okay, and I think we're down to one last question, and then I probably will get on. And Noah, I hope you can stay on, because I certainly want your insight when I start talking about swipe red. And let's see, there is a question here, is how can you discuss the efficiency of reaching out through text, email, social media, legacy media, and email or mail, U.S. Post Office mail? Do you have any?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that one of the things that you'll find is that each region of the country, and even different regions and media markets within a state, consume media differently. And so when you're putting together and building a campaign plan, it pays to do a little bit of research to figure out where people actually see their information flow, how that comes in. In Northern Virginia or the Washington, D.C. area, you have a higher propensity of folks, or a higher population of folks with a college degree or higher. And you might find that 50% of American adults use LinkedIn as a social media if they have a bachelor's degree or higher. That might be an avenue that you spend a little bit more time on there, versus if you're running in an area with less proportional college education, but perhaps more use of Twitter and things like that. So I think that there's no one formula. Right now, I think that the only thing I'd probably subscribe to is that digital messaging has gotten a lot harder, and text message fundraising has gotten a lot harder because of oversaturation of the market. But there's no one formula for your media mix and your media matrix that will solve all of your problems. It really is a state by state, district by district, community by community difference in how people consume.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. So unless anybody has any more questions for Noah, I'm going to reclaim the host, and I'm going to talk a little bit about swipe red, the subject that, of course, everybody knows is near and dear to my heart. And so let me just get this up, and we'll get started. So really, when you start talking about relational, you really are putting the power of the people can we put everybody on mute? Putting the power of the campaign in other people's hands, and that is using friend-to-friend outreach. Noah's talked a lot about relational, but I want to bring it a little more down into a little more detail as in really the benefits. So what really drives people to show up for an election? I mean, it's the number one question we all should ask is why, how can we get more people out on election day, and what really drives people to show up long after the election day has passed and continue to stay involved, because that's the only way we're going to continue to win elections, is if we keep people involved along the way and not just around, you know, the 6 weeks before an election. Over the last decades, we've scrambled to adopt the latest and greatest in targeting, GOTV tactics, outreach technology, trying to answer these questions. But it remains unchanged, is people vote when they feel it's personally meaningful to them. And, you know, consider how rare is it that a stranger is going to motivate you to do something? You know, it's not very often. And in an era where we have less and less trust in their institutions and are less and less trust in politicians, friend, family, and community members is really what's going to drive people to feel personally involved. And those are the things that, in my opinion, sharing values when we talk to people that are closest to us is what's going to engage us and keep us involved. I talk about this a lot because I think it's really important, is FOMO. Everybody's heard of it. I love this little picture. I found it and I love it because it's the fear of missing out. And that's really what social media is all based on. And that's what relational is all based on. When I go into social media and I see my friends going to Arizona and my other friend is going to California, and I'm sitting here in cold Minnesota, I'm thinking, what am I doing here? I'm missing out. You know, and that is what drives a lot of relational. And it is the social proof and concept of people that are influencing decisions based on what other people are doing. And, you know, I love this little graphic here because it really is, you know, what are my friends telling me to do? Right? They're saying, get out to vote, or get out to vote for Noah Jennings, or get out to vote for Dennis Smith. Doesn't make any difference. If your friend is telling you, you don't want to be left out. You want to be part of that, or part of the group, right? We all do. And the benefits, there was a couple of questions about the, you know, the efficiency and numbers. And these numbers, I think, are really indicative of how relational works. When you have personal relationships are extremely motivating. We just talked about that. But the likelihood of somebody to get out to vote if a campaign or a cause is using relational is 8.3 percentage points more likely to get out to vote. And this is on a very in-depth relational organizing study from Columbia University. And if your friend asks you to get involved, you are 8 times more likely to come to an event or organize, and you're 6.5 times more likely to sign a petition than even compared to peer-to-peer text messaging. So friends and family and colleagues and people in my community asking me to do things is far more effective than a television ad or even a stranger calling me on the phone, or I'm sorry to tell you, door knocking. When somebody strange comes to my door, that's a cold call. I wanted to show these numbers because we're very proud of it. And this is, you know, Noah can speak more to this if he likes. But these are some of if you went to Buzz360, our website, you would see that there's a case study. And DeSantis performed 25% better in the precincts where swipe red used in contrast to those precincts that did not. 25%. That's a lot. And DeSantis outperformed polls by 40% in those precincts. And it was interesting because after we got back from Iowa and we were all disappointed that Governor DeSantis had decided to step down, we thought, oh my gosh, we really wanted to build out a good case study, but we did a lot of in-depth studying and everything was the same. You know, the paid door knockers, the door knocker, what you talked about, the world-class ground game or grassroots organization that you developed, Noah, everything was the same. But those precincts where we had strong campaign or volunteers working and using Swipe Red, they overperformed 40%. Everything else was the same. There was 265 precincts where Swipe Red was widely adopted, and a positive voter increase of up to 24.7 percentage points was achieved. And in the precincts where Swipe Red was deployed, the turnout was 19% higher, or 4 percentage points, than the rest of the precincts. Noah, do you have any comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was, very clear, even as I, looked at the map and the New York Times' breakdown precinct by precinct, with all the different coloring, just where Swipe Red was used. And as we go back through and check the data, we can see that the people that shared their contacts, the people that, really leveraged that relational organizing tool to reach into their personal communities, their personal Rolodexes, it was just overwhelmingly positive results. And so, the only thing I kick myself for is that we didn't get you guys on sooner to be able to spread this out and adopt it wider.
Yeah, that's worth mentioning, because this was only in about a 6 or 7 week period of time. So we were still very proud of us and and our product and the team. So when you go into Swipe Red, there's several different types, and I got to tell you, I was so excited about Noah because he really did a great job in putting out messages. He taught me a bunch of things, which I thought was really good. But there's different types of messages: friend to friend, which you can text message your friend, email, make a phone call, direct message your friends; peer to peer, same type of channels that you can use; neighborhood outreach messages to neighbors, and block parties and block walking. You can all do that. And social media sharing, and advocates sharing messages out on their social network, not the campaign. Everything that Swipe Red does, or relational does, is all about a friend reaching a friend, or a colleague reaching a colleague. Noah showed this a similar thing as these graphs. And when you start thinking about it, and this is one of the things that we talk about often when we start with a new customer, is when you download Swipe Red, start thinking about who are those people that you know. Is it your sister, your best friend, your mom? All those people that might want to get those messages and get them involved, and think about that social network and how exciting it could be to be involved in a project and engage your friends in conversations about your campaign and your cause. And ask people in your network, are you interested in getting involved? And those are some of the things that we could talk. I might have the next the next series be all about relational. So I would love to hear if people are interested in doing a 45-minute session on relational only. But that's what we talk about every single day. And that can be campaigns or causes or advocacy groups. But you see the same diagram as Noah was just showing. For those of you, again, my name is Lisa Schneegans. We are an approved vendor with the RNC. Here's my phone number and my email. If you're interested or want to see some other expertise come on, we love to hear suggestions. Know if you have anybody else that you can think of. We have a couple of things on the docket that we're thinking about. An attorney about texting, the legalities of texting. I would like to do a relational if people are interested in that. We also have a couple of others that are the RNC with data. So those are some of the things that we're thinking about for our next session. Anybody else have any questions? I see Noah's still on. If we have a couple of other questions. Let's see, Linda has a question. Let me see what that is, Linda. Go ahead and you just ask your own question.
Oh, do you have any thoughts about how the Swipe Red may have impacted the turnout for the Minnesota presidential primary?
Yeah, that's interesting. We did for those of you that are in this call that aren't from Minnesota, we did a project with the Minnesota GOP using Swipe Red, and they didn't do any peer-to-peer. They didn't do very little social. It was all serious, all friend to friend. And it was exciting because about 70% of the people actually shared their contacts, which is high. You know, it really showed a high level of interest. And we had a bigger turnout in those districts where we had more sharing. Now, we're just analyzing some of that data now, Linda. And I expect that we're going to be coming out with some numbers shortly. We did a project with our 3rd congressional districts in Minnesota in 2023, and we've got some voter history that we're looking at right now. Is that for that as well? Any other questions for myself or for Noah? Oh, let's see. I see some more in the chat. Let's see if there's more questions.
Lisa, just screening back, I wondered if you could throw that one up that had the 8.3 people mentioned. I didn't get a screenshot before you moved on.
Which one?
Like 3 slides back, maybe. 8.
This one?
No, it had statistics on it before that. One more before.
That one?
One more
Oh.
before.
More?
Thank you.
The next one.
Awesome. Thank you.
You bet. Well, I hope that this was useful for everyone. Again, my name is Lisa Schneegans. I'm a co-founder with Paul Schneegans in Buzz 360, and we would love to hear from you. And Noah, I think if you want to drop your maybe your phone number or email in the chat, if people want to reach out to you, you know, they might be running for office and they want you to run their campaign. You never know.
Absolutely will do. And I just want to put in one closing plug on Lisa and Klaus. You know, we came to them with a lot of asks and expectations, and you know, we played around with a lot of different things that we could do with the technology. And you know, anytime we wanted to experiment or develop or you know, see what we could add, they were always there. They were in the room with us, helping us, you know, navigate those different things and figuring out ways that we could get from point A to point B. And so, yeah, I can't plug enough the fact that the Buzz 360 team worked incredibly hard with us, solving complex problems in very quick fashion with a very quick turnaround. And we greatly appreciated it.
Thank you. Well, very good, you guys. I did record this. So we will be sending out a link for everybody that had signed up or that was here today. And we are excited for the 2024 cycle. I think there's a lot of good things that are going to happen. I think that we're in a position to really take back some seats and make a difference this cycle. And I know Noah's going to be working hard. We're going to be working hard, and all of you will be too. There's Noah's email address and his mobile if you wanted to text him. So feel free to reach out to either one of us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Noah, we'll talk soon.
Thanks, Lisa.
Bye-bye.